Welcome to Thinkin Bros. My name is Chris.
And I'm Alex.
We're your favorite corner store philosophers trying to figure out life one conundrum at a time. And today we have a special guest by the name of, well, do you want to use a code name considering your background?
Yeah, that might be interesting.
Okay, so I mean, you're free to choose it. Maybe we can give you a few moments for inspiration, but essentially, he's our expert on drugs. And I think drugs have a very interesting implication for any philosophical discussion. I think they've been under talked about in history because people didn't have access to what we have access now. So, all your great philosophers, although some of them were known to be fanatics of drugs, didn't really use them. And today, modern answers would be very different from what we've received from philosophers. And I think your experience in the drug world, if we can call it that, should give us some insight. So, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us your code name?
Sure. I still haven't come up with a code name. I guess you can just go with Phil. I guess that'll work.
All right, you just choose a very common name, so you're unrecognizable. That's smart. That's very smart.
Yeah, very smart. So a bit of introduction. I've been doing drugs for I guess like 8 years, something like that, since like 5th grade of high school. I had a slow start. I used to be more of a huge nerd, as you would say, so not the most popular kid in high school. So like I wouldn't get invited to the parties and do all the drugs there as the cool guy kids would do. So I had a bit more of a slow start. But when I did start, I started for real, and I did a lot. Especially when I was in CJEP, between high school and university. That was one of the big moments for me. And yeah, I guess that's an introduction. I don't know if that was good.
Absolutely. If it comes from the heart, it's good. That's what we say here. It's our most common quote.
Yeah, we often say that.
So, okay, that's awesome. So I think the common outlook on drugs, there are two sides. The kind of hippie side of the young people trying to explore life, and the parent side of like, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. And I think both are a little bit too extreme. And I think that, just discussing it philosophically could help us come to some conclusions. So that's kind of Alex, do you have anything to add about the common outlook? Because that's kind of one of the structure points of what we're trying to
do. Not much. I think the initial discussion made me think that, yeah, it's now, destigmatized. And since all the world is connected now, there can be communities of drug users that connect. And it's more talked about than ever before and less dramatized. And so I think this gives us space to have this discussion.
Absolutely. By the way, Phil, did you know that one of our CEGEP teachers, Rachel, I think she was a pothead, and she had a Reddit page about reviewing pot strands. Fun fact.
I did not know about that. That is great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I discovered it very late in having her
in
course.
Office hours.
Yeah, exactly. I discovered it the hard way, but I really liked her before, and then after that, I just doubled in liking. So I think the specific question we're trying to answer here is: do drugs have a place in one's life? Okay, and that's too broad. So I would like to, concretize it, if that's a word.
We're all French here.
Yeah, we're all French. Let's be honest. To something like, do drugs have a place in a happy life or perhaps a full life? And I mean, I guess are they instrumental in accomplishing the goal of your life? And also, because the easiest answer to what is the goal of life, I guess, would be to be happy. And because we haven't had an episode on the goal of life, I guess we can take that as an intermediary response. So what's your first impression if I ask you, do drugs have a place in a happy life? Or I guess in accomplishing one's goal in life, I guess. Do you have any quick summary answer?
The thing that's weird for me with that would be what would be a life goal? How would you describe a life goal like that a drug would help you achieve?
Well,
Um,
I guess. Well, again, if you take something as widespread as the belief that the goal of life is to be happy, right? Let's
right.
just accept that for the purpose of this discussion. Or maybe if you have a better response, maybe we can base ourselves on that, right?
Yeah, well, then if it's to be happy, then like you can use like literature like Brave New World, right? Where I don't know if you guys read it, but in
Yep.
Brave New World, basically, like the population is divided into categories of like importance or like intelligence, basically. And the lowest categories are basically constantly fed drugs. In the book, it's called Sama or something,
Soma, yeah,
and
yeah.
it yeah, and basically makes them happy and makes them complacent with life, and makes them accept their situation. And like with that perspective, I would definitely say like, well, yeah, if your point your goal is to be happy and don't really care about all the rest, then yeah, I think drugs can definitely help you with that. But you're gonna be lacking with the rest, you know.
Interesting. Okay, so we had an episode on happiness where we actually like laid out for people how to become happy. Surprisingly, I know it might surprise you to hear that, but let me summarize that for you. Okay, what we proposed is that it's the sacrifice of dopamine spikes. I don't know if you're informed on like the dopamine system a little bit.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Alex read a book. I've been very interested in it, and we proposed that.
One big point we stressed was the difference between pleasure and happiness.
Yeah, of course, right. And we thought that happiness is achievable through the sacrifice of those pleasurable things. Well, extremely pleasurable, like demeasurably pleasurable. So you would take something like eating highly processed sugar, right? Like, oh, you have to sacrifice those times where you could get the dopamine spike from eating cake and instead eat healthy. And a good meal is still something that can be said to be pleasurable, but moderately so, right? And this is where we would definitely disagree unless you want to
Yeah, I
disagree.
think
Yeah.
what Chris is sort of disagreeing with, and what I would say too, is that in that situation in Brave New World, those people are not happy. And honestly, it's been a while. I don't remember the plot exactly, but isn't that exactly what happens? Like the story
Yeah,
is that
I do
someone,
believe at the end. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
like someone is really not happy with that situation, and maybe they're like fine with life most of the time because they get numbed by their little vape thing, and then eventually they realize that they're not happy, right? They're just complacent and comfortable.
Yeah, maybe it's more fake happiness that it creates, and it wouldn't actually be happiness that could contribute to your life goal.
Hmm.
That could
Hmm.
build like that. And
Yeah.
maybe that's more.
Yeah. And the fake happiness, maybe it could be described as like a constant, like a constant shooting up of pleasure, just to use crude terms, right? And
Hmm.
the thing is, like, I mean, obviously with happiness is the same thing, right? You have to upkeep that, right? Like if you're lustful, you have to keep having meaningless relationships. And if you want to achieve happiness, well, supposedly so, unless you disagree with that, you have to kind of keep up the one relationship and commit to it and make sacrifices, right? Like, oh, I can't choose this career, it would mean going to another country, blah blah blah. So okay, let me introduce you to the concept of the hedonic treadmill. And the way we understand that is essentially the way your dopamine system works is that when you kind of use these big pleasure evoking things, right? The hedonic treadmill is essentially in subjecting yourself to certain pleasures, you swipe up on the treadmill of
Right.
the
You
dopamine
bring up the
system.
pace of your dopamine system, and you
Yeah.
get more happiness.
Yeah. And anything that, well, not happiness, right? That's kind of the
Pleasure,
point. The
yes,
joy, the joy. And the point of that is, well, you turn it up, and the default setting of the treadmill just keeps going up. And that becomes, well, like imagine pressing on the button to turn up the speed is taking the drug, and then navigating the treadmill is your life. So the problem with that is if you start using drugs, the pace keeps going up. And to augment your pleasure, you have to turn up the treadmill, right? I mean, that's tolerance, right? The development of
Yeah.
tolerance. And then
Hmm.
obviously losing that dependence would be kind of the exhaustion that you get from having to run on a treadmill, which was, initially designed to potentially walk.
Yeah,
to
when
walk
you
on.
don't have those drugs anymore, the treadmill is still turned up, and then you struggle to keep up with, or you miss that high of having the treadmill running fast and being facilitated by drugs.
Yeah. And,
Mm-hmm.
Obviously dependence is not a very philosophical topic, right? Like, I guess it's not a very smart thing to say, well, dependence will potentially ruin your life. But we kind of thought about this with Alex. Like, what if you stay under the threshold of dependence and masterfully arrange your drug intake to, let's say, you have Monday's cocaine, Tuesday's weed, right? And you kind of stay off it, but you get these constant dopamine spikes, and a week in between isn't enough to develop a tolerance, and you kind of set up this perfect system
Cycle,
where you're resistant
Yeah.
to dependence, right? But the problem with that, of course, would be, well, your dopamine requirements to even feel the very slight happiness are
Yeah.
going so high that it's immeasurable. So I didn't
They
ask
kind of
any specific question, but yeah, again, like, just tell me what you think.
Yeah, they kind of have a term for that, for what you're describing, where you like set up the perfect setup where, like, on Monday you're doing cocaine, and then the 2 weeks after you can redo it because you like your tolerance reset or whatever. That's called polysubstance abuse, and there's also a word for like the addiction to it, which is called polysubstance addiction, and that's
You've been on
basically
it
where
for a couple of years.
me personally, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, but I'm kidding. But yeah.
I mean, I had a few years of it, yes, but
Ooh.
I'm relatively cleaner now.
Mhm.
Um, but
I'm
yeah,
glad to
so
hear just a personal statement.
that's good. Um, but yeah, no, so um, like using different substances to sub out and like never reach a certain tolerance is a thing, but what also happens is that a lot of substances have interdependencies. So like um cocaine and, like, for example, MDMA or whatever, they're not like, they're both kind of stimulant. So at one point your brain gets used to that stimulant rush, and it'll be the same where like you start developing a tolerance to it, even if you're not like switching. Even if you are switching between one substance and another, like if they still have similarities, you can still develop some tolerances to it. So it's not a foolproof system either.
Okay, I thought of it more as a thought experiment, but it's an actual thing and also
Yeah.
doesn't work. So that's great. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So maybe we can categorize drugs and talk about the validity of their use.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I would like to kind of, one would think we could categorize it for, through psychedelics, painkillers, stimulants, but I think a much more like maybe psychological or human or perhaps philosophical approach would be to categorize them in the categories of why people use them, right?
Mhm.
Maybe you guys have other ideas of categories to discuss, but I have come up with psychological pain, physical pain, or recreational use, just to increase, I don't know, I guess life fun, right? Do you guys can you guys think of any others?
As to like reasons why to, like, as a category, as a reason why to use a drug.
Yeah. Why you would start, or why would you keep it up?
I think your recreation category is pretty big and encapsulates a lot. Because I feel like there's different types of recreation, right? You can like have a recreation where it's a party where you want to go fast, where you want to enjoy yourself and talk to people and be social, or just like situations where you just want to chill at home by yourself, and that's like a very different category to me, at least. Um,
Okay, maybe we can start with the first two and kind of, make the proper adjustments with recreational use in time.
okay, and what would those first two be?
Yeah,
Sorry.
so psychological pain and physical
Mhm.
pain. So, I mean, it's not a revolutionary thought, but obviously, for psychological pain, what would people take? Kind of. Uh, do you have any?
Mm,
Alcohol.
Sure, sure. Y-
Yeah, alcohol, any benzodiazepines, so like Xanax and things like that. That's like the top one anxiety slash numbing drug.
Yeah.
If you don't want to feel anything and so not feel any of that psychological pain, it's one of the best ways to do it.
Right.
Uh,
Okay. And obviously,
we,
yeah. Sorry.
I was just gonna say weed can also help you cope with a lot of those things. Like psychologically, it can be a big crutch.
I guess that's where I'm going with this. Is it's a downstream approach, right? I'm going to explain the example. Like someone's, I don't know, dropping logs of wood from like on a stream, and the people and the village at the bottom of the stream is getting a problem where the water's not getting to them, and they're just sending people to take the logs out instead of stopping the people dumping the logs in it, right? So that's, I mean, obviously drugs are a downstream approach to that, and the problem with that is, well, one, when you don't have them, you're in trouble, because not only is the psychological pain going to be back, but also, isn't it going to be worse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
because of the
definitely.
the things. Maybe you know the mechanism.
Well, well, depending on what you're using to cope with psychological issues, just most of the time when you develop a dependence because you're using something uh, often to cope with your issues, well, you're gonna start setting up a tolerance slash dependence, and then once you lose access to that substance, well, you're gonna go into withdrawals, right? Pretty much every drug has withdrawals. Weed also has withdrawals, right? Where if you've been taking weed for like months or years or whatever, and then you stop cold turkey, well, you're gonna have some issues. Like you're not gonna be able to eat, not gonna be able to sleep. Like those are a few common things that happen to people with withdrawals. So, um, yes, your issues will be worse because on top of your issues coming back, right? Because you don't have your coping mechanism anymore, or you're gonna have the withdrawals. So, it's always gonna be worse for sure when you get out of it.
Yeah. Okay. And again, it's not a revolutionary thought. Using drugs to cope is not a healthy approach to it. But of course, we understand the implications of that, and it's not only a momentary fix, but it's like putting a band-aid on that increases the friction and then makes the wound bigger, right? And then you have to deal with something that's even worse than it was initially. And
Yeah.
of course, with physical pain, I mean, it's kind of similar. Obviously, the core thing has to be addressed, and I think that's what it comes down to. When you try to fix a problem with drugs, I think you have to think about, is it fixing the cause, right? And I know this is an epidemic, right? Painkiller abuse, but the thing is, the problem with that is that it starts in a reasonable way where you are dealing with pain that you're not supposed to be dealing with, and there's no healthy way to cope with it, right? Like post operation, right? There aren't any healthy ways to cope with it, like a psychologist is going to suggest to you. So you're treating something that is kind of directly related to something that isn't supposed to happen to you, and there's no healthy way to cope for it. So then people start off that, and then they discover what the painkillers can do to them way after the operation when the pain is gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
So I guess what you would say about both types of pain is that the use may be justified or useful in the moment when pain is unbearable, and that's the only thing that makes it better. But it either has to be done like extremely carefully, or you need to like consider the potential downstream consequences of addiction, and then decide to just suffer through the pain, something like that.
yeah, and I think in your decision making process, the short sighted view of taking something that, well, psychological pain, I guess could be categorized as something that enters in that realm too, where some people have disorders that are so extreme and not due to something that they are in control of, that it warrants the use of drugs, and cognitive behavioral therapy can only do so much. So I think, well, if we were to kind of transition it to a more philosophical way of viewing it, the recommendation would be the short-sighted way to see the first pill you take is like, okay, I have an uncontrollable situation, right? Be it physical or mental, and I'm going to, use the only way out of this situation by taking it, and I'm going to fix that situation. Well, what people fail to see is, first of all, the baseline of whatever you think your normal pain levels were is going to change because of the drugs, right? Like, I mean, okay, I don't want to overstep my grounds in my knowledge of drugs, but I know painkillers have some. What's the thing with stool, the congestion, the stool congestion? What is it?
Constipation, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah. I lose words. So the constipation thing, but isn't?
Yeah, no, opioids do cause constipation.
Right. Okay, so essentially, what you have to see if you want to, look long term, and in some situation where drug use is, in quotes, warranted, and in evaluating the downsides of it, it shouldn't only be, well, okay, I'm going to be on drugs for this duration, and it's going to help with this. It's larger than that. It's everything that will come after that should go in your calculation of making that choice. I feel like I'm not saying much, but
well, usually when you're like getting, well, when you're doing it medically, right, where you're getting prescribed like opioids or something, like the doctors are not dumb, right? They're aware of the addiction risks, and they will taper off your dose, right? So you'll maybe have a 1 month prescription, but then they'll add maybe a week or two to that where you'll have receive lower doses gradually, and just to help you transition off of it, right? So it's not always you gotta stop cold turkey and then you gotta deal with the withdrawals, right?
yeah, of course. But you
So
said
like
doctors
medically,
aren't dumb, but they were dumb because
most of the
that's how
time,
it.
most of the time.
Yeah, that's how it started, right? That's how the so-called
Yes.
epidemic started.
Well, the reason why it started mostly is because the doctors were getting pushed, uh, like oxycodones and whatever, from the company producing it. There was a lot of like misinformation that was going on from the company making it, that they were saying that the drug was not addictive, that they were free to prescribe it as much as they want because it was not supposed to be addictive. That was the whole sell. That was the whole pitch at the start, for oxys, was that they were not addictive. But boy, were they wrong.
Yeah, to be fair, we went through a period of that with cigarettes, and so that's, I mean, just
You
historical.
say we as if we were alive in the 19.
No, but back in the 80s, don't you remember?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, so
On Wall Street.
yeah,
Oh, are you about to move to the next category?
if you want me to.
Because I was, if you were moving to the next category, I was curious where we would place coffee, because I don't feel like it's recreational use per se. I think people use it for, like, to serve a purpose, right? It's not just for fun, but it's not necessarily, it's not physical pain, unless you're already addicted and then you're in pain when you don't drink coffee. But maybe it's psychological pain. Would you create a new
Wouldn't
category
that
for it?
be performance enhancing?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, that's an
'Cause-
interesting category. Yeah, that's an interesting category.
Because the whole reason why you drink coffee in the morning is to wake you up. Well, usually it's because you've been drinking coffee for the last 6 years, and well, now you can't wake up without it because you have independence. But yeah, it's for performance enhancement, right?
Yeah, I'd actually create the fourth category where it is performance enhancement, but that's okay. That's a good thing.
Yeah, but I'd like to mention one last thing for psychological pain. There's a lot. I mean, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but there's a lot of new research going on where they're using things like ecstasy, ketamine, or acid. Maybe not acid. I think it's more shrooms, but to help people deal with like psychological issues like depression and whatever. Um, there's a few clinics doing this, I think, in the U.S., and I believe they're starting to do it in Canada as well. And yeah, so I just wanted to mention that as well, as like, yes, drug usage is bad and can lead to some mental issues, but it can also help fix those mental issues. Obviously, these clinics are not doing this like as every day you're gonna take this and whatever. No, it's like a session that happens maybe once a month, once every 2 months, where they consume the drug and talk with a psychologist or whatever, and they go through their issues, and it can help people. So I just wanted to mention that as well, as it's not all bad. It can also be helpful.
I think that's very interesting. It might sway my opinion on psychological and physical pain use drugs. Before I definitely say it's a no completely. Then you have someone who, let's say, breaks their leg and they have no choice but to take painkillers during the rehab. I don't see a situation where you refuse that because it will be hard, but you have to be aware of why it's hard. But then you say, a big question I was going to ask is, can drug use be non-pathological and genuinely supplement our life? Well, the thing with what you said, it seems very reasonable, but I'm also a big believer in kind of, Mother Nature, right? The way we evolved. No, I am. And the way we evolved is without, in the sense that, our biology evolved without kind of being exposed to these drugs. So there wasn't the filtration system of, what is it? What's the thing with Darwin?
Natural selection.
Yeah. There wasn't the selection process of natural selection, right? Like, if you include every drug we have access to right now, right? Put it thousands of years ago, the people who live today are people who have adapted biologies for those drugs, right? That isn't the case. Let's say a lot of what we have is quite modern, wouldn't you say? At least like in the concentrations that we have it. I know opium, right? Like it has history, perhaps some hallucinogenics, but some drugs with a bigger effect, right? Those pill formats where you just take it and you don't feel pain for 8 hours. That's not a thing that biology has evolved with. And therefore, I doubt the validity of, well, I don't doubt the effectiveness of its methods, but I doubt the validity of it in supplementing our lives in the long term, in the sense that it kind of, I wouldn't say goes against our biology, but risks going against our biology. What do you think of that argument?
I'd agree with it, but I don't know. I'm still not. I'm still not sold on it being bad. I mean, it's obviously bad long term, right? But I feel like maybe this is just me coping, right? I feel like there could be a mechanism where it would be valid to like have alongside during your life and not like mess up your goals or values or uh, that stuff. I don't know. That's
Yeah,
a good
maybe we
question.
can let it come out during the episode, but
Mhm.
it just I really see it as a band-aid solution, and I wish to be swayed because one the one I like coffee, and if I philosophically conclude that drugs don't have a place in my life, I should stop coffee. So I live by what I determine, and then also the studies that you proposed to me in seeing a certain value, a therapeutic value in shrooms and psychedelics. It's interesting. That's interesting to consider.
Mhm.
It's just for me often when you see something like a fix for psychological pain, a fix for physical pain. Well, I'd give an example for psychological pain. It's, let's say someone has had a very rough upbringing and their childhood haunts them and they decide to get into pills and those numb the psychological pain. Well, unless you want to spend the 80 next years on pills, guess what's not changing? Your childhood, right? And guess what's getting worse when you're getting off those pills? Your pain. Okay, so
Yeah.
it
There's
seems,
no justifying that one. That's for sure.
yeah, but it's also, I gave a narrow example. Like, yeah, okay, I
Mhm.
can give any example and make you agree with me, but it doesn't cover the whole point. That's fine. But you look at physical pain, and as I said, like post-op, I think it's justifiable. But you look at something like chronic pain, and in one of my classes, I had a person who dealt with chronic pain come and give a lecture to us, and he said that he hopped between 8 different painkillers. They work for a while, then they don't. They make some other factors of life unbearable, right? Because quality of life is something to consider as well. And I know, like, you can numb yourself all you want with painkillers, but some of those reduce the quality of life so much that it's just unjustifiable. and he told us this whole tale. And I think, you know, in the chronic pain world, that's something that's agreed upon. Even the things that are supposed to work long term, I mean, either you develop a tolerance to them, even if you cycle them, right? And he said that finding, well, first of all, he went through cognitive behavior therapy. I think he started doing physical exercise, something like that. He found a like holistic approach to it that unfortunately I don't remember the exact issue he had, and I also don't remember the exact fix, but I know that the conclusion from him was he found this lifestyle that was certainly sustainable until the end of his life, that completely fixed his chronic pain, right? I think lower back pain is one of the most widespread chronic pains that could be due to, I don't know, excessive sitting, whatever. And I think that, yeah, it's short-sighted to think that drugs have not a value in that. Like, yeah, you take the pill, pain goes away. I can't deny that.
Long-term value, right?
Of course, long-term value. It's just so, and that's why, you know, from a philosophical perspective, you're looking at, you know, it's quite a morbid view, but you know, you're at your 100th year and you look back at your life and you're like, should I have taken those or not? Is my question, kind of. Okay,
yeah,
so
no, I get your point of view. Yeah, makes sense.
yeah, I'm sorry that it's not more like open-ended, but that's often how I speak. And that's why Alex has said 2 words in the episode. So, you know what? I think it's a bigger category, recreational use. So maybe let's move on to performance enhancing. Also quite a philosophical debate, right? I think the way I would frame it is you're willing to do things for your body. Well, let's actually, obviously the most extreme case of that is doping in athletes, right? And it's the reason people consider it unethical is because you're ready to do something for your body that might, you know, make your life after its use more difficult, make your life shorter, that some other people aren't ready to do. And that's where the unethical part comes from. Of course, the negative effects of coffee are so minimal that no one would argue that for coffee, but maybe, do you have an outlook on the ethics of doping in athletes? Is that something you prepared in your mind? Or?
No, I did not prepare that, but I was gonna say, for another like performance enhancing example, I don't know if we accept it, but I'd say like alcohol can also be seen as a performance enhancer, because
in driving, right?
Yeah, in driving. Operating any motorized vehicles, yeah. It's
OSHA certified.
what I meant was like for like social situations. For a lot of people, alcohol will remove social blocks, right? Where it will make them way more sociable, way more open to talking to new people, meeting new people, and being interesting in conversations, right? It'll be a big pusher for that. So I don't know if I'd put that in recreation, but I feel like it has its place in performance enhancement, where it's like you're making yourself better at something by using the substance. And the same could be said for like any stimulants, right? Like cocaine or amphetamines or methamphetamine at that point, like to go faster or to socialize faster, to talk faster. Like those are great drugs to like talk to someone for ages and never stop, right? Never let them put a word, and those are like good drugs to do that. So like I don't know if we could put that in performance enhancing.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think that makes me think that that whole category has, you know, the similar counter arguments. Like for athletes, the counter argument is the side effects. For alcohol, it could be the same thing, right? It's like the hangover after, the long-term effects on your liver and everything. The side effects are really what should make you think about it twice. And for coffee, it's the addiction part of never being able to stop. I think, yeah, it is not that bad because there are no side effects. If you never stop, and you're fine, right? Maybe you need to increase your coffee dosage from time to time because it doesn't hit the same. But the
coffee still does have some long-lasting effects. I just want to put that in there. It's like any other stimulants. It makes the heart beat faster, so it does have some potential for heart issues in the long run. Just wanted to put that there.
Yeah.
It's just more tolerable, right? That's how why
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
accepted in a way, right? And you're going to see the effects in 60 years, whereas all the other stimulants, you're going to see them in 5 years or something.
Yeah. But
So
like
yeah.
a lot of people like um I mean like vaping is bad, right? But but it's better than cigarettes. That is for sure. Health Canada says it. Um so my main point here is
Sorry,
that
the way you said it sounds so sarcastic.
why was that?
I don't know, like, oh, well, it's better than cigarettes.
Sure.
It's for sure. Health Canada said it.
No, because I used to work at a vape shop and we weren't allowed to say that vapes were actually better than cigarettes. We were just allowed to quote like a study that Health Canada did, so that's why I said like that. It's out of habit. Um, but what I wanted to get to is like nicotine is very similar to caffeine, where they are both stimulants, and one person will drink a coffee at the start of the morning, another person will vape for the rest of it for the whole day, right? So they have similar effects in the long run, at least from what I've seen online doing my research.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's insightful, but it's those more, societally accepted drugs because they accomplish to a lesser extent what the others do, but also I hope that the conclusions we make about the more extreme ones are transferable and perhaps just take more willpower to implement, right? No one would start their day, well, Jordan Belfort would, obviously counter example, but no one would start their day with cocaine, but you started with coffee. And then the fix for starting your day with cocaine is very clear. Well, fight your dependence, then get a good night's sleep. Perhaps in a year you're gonna have a good energy level. Well, coffee is a band-aid fix in that sense too, right? It's just we have the resources and it's of a lesser gravity enough so you can get on it and never get off of it. But ultimately, if it had worse effects, right? The arguments people would use against it would be like, okay, well, you don't have good energy levels. Why is that? Is your sleep dysregulated? Do you not exercise enough? Blah blah blah. People would ask all these questions, and obviously, let me get back to my favorite goddess, Mother Nature. We didn't evolve with coffee, so the people whose survival led to us existing didn't drink coffee. So why are we? Do I have an answer to that? I don't know. Okay, let me ask you a personal question, okay? Because I know my answer. I think Alex knows his. If you imagine the perfect you, right? The peak of what you could be, and you imagine the typical day in the life, would drugs have a place in it?
Um, that's a great question. I mean, and it's hard to answer because the ideal you, like how do you even structure that, right? Um,
I compartmentalize realistically, like, oh, what does my relationship look like? What does my career look like? What does my financial status look like? I've given it a sense of thought. Obviously, making you come up with it on the spot is kind of hard, but maybe you can
yeah.
approximate your answer.
Well, I think I have a slightly different image of what Chris means than Chris does, because I can imagine the perfect me, but going as far as to saying that the perfect me has a perfect day that will happen every day, and that's the structure of every day, and that's it, is going too far for me. Because the perfect me would, have a different day every day, maybe try out new experiences, try out new stuff, and
Then I think that's just part of what you wish to be as a person, and that's fine. If one day you go bowling and the other you go golfing, and that's still a perfect day for you. I'm not saying it's the same day. What I'm saying is in an achievable manner, right? I'm not saying, oh, you should be 6'5". Like, okay, you're your height, and that's fine. In an achievable manner.
6'6".
Okay, you're 6'6", but yeah. I really want to drop down to 6'5", but I always walk barefoot for
no,
that
my
purpose.
point is, you're saying, does your perfect day involve drugs? And maybe the answer is 1 out of 30 days of my perfect life involves drugs, and that's a
that's
valid answer
interesting.
you would accept.
That's interesting because we can come back to the thing I set up at the beginning. What are we trying to answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do drugs have a place in a happy life, right? That's our intermediary big question. Well, I guess the answer then would be, does trying every experience available to humans like have a place in the perfect life?
Yeah, being curious and exploring, I think definitely has a place in like maybe not for you. I know you have a different personality. You're a bit of a psychopath, etc.
Yeah, I'm gonna cut that out because I have that power. But the thing with that is, to me, if okay, let's say we determine, right, end of the episode, our conclusion is human experience is very varied, and you should try everything once. Well, my thing with trying everything once is it's part of a self-discovery in establishing the perfect you, right? You have to travel 8 countries before determining that maybe the first one you were in is the perfect one. Maybe the third one you were in is the perfect one. I think at a certain point, you have to limit yourself in that, right? You're not going to explore all the 263 countries that exist.
Look, does what I'm look? I thought of this while you were speaking. Let's say I've tried sports, right? I like soccer and volleyball. I want to play those sports regularly, and that's part of my perfect day. But then I also like badminton, and I want to play badminton twice a year. That's part of my perfect life too. Isn't that fine?
I guess I see commitment in a more restrictive manner. I think you're going to get more out of, as we've determined in our episode on happiness, more out of long-term investment, right? You find soccer cool now, but if you hadn't done it ever in your life, would it be as cool? Probably not, because you would be very bad at it, right? So discovery is good, right? Like I have more fun at things I'm good at. But the thing is, after a while, you have to calm down with trying new experiences and say to yourself, this is good enough, right? I mean, the country you're going to choose to live in for your life, are you going to have visited every single country? Is there a value in? Yeah?
No.
Okay. So what I'm trying to say is, at a certain point, you cap it. And, well, okay, my larger point is the following. I'm speaking a lot, unfortunately, but self-discovery is important, but it's only important for the purpose of setting up the long-term things that will lead to your happiness. And the thing about drugs is, well, we've determined long-term use isn't warranted. So now, why would you try them out? Simply for the purpose of knowing how it feels? I mean, if I try out something that feels extremely enjoyable and spikes my dopamine, the only thing that it's going to do is going to make me desire it more.
Yeah, but my metaphor is having already tried out, let's say, like soccer, volleyball, and badminton are drugs. I've tried, or no, well, then actually that doesn't work. But let's say badminton is a drug, and I like badminton, and I want to play it twice a year. I've explored that drug, and I want to do it twice a year, and that doesn't make me addicted to it, and that, I guess we haven't discussed recreational use, which we're talking about sort of now.
Okay, but do you understand how, because I'm trying to paint it as a kind of a vice. You could take any dopamine inducing thing and say, well, why wouldn't I do it twice a year? Well, okay, balance is important, but the thing is, I'm hoping you're restricting in your example, your drug use of volleyball or whatever it was, badminton, to twice a year, and then you're not doing any other dopamine inducing activity at any other day in the year. Okay, that way you're...
Okay, well, then I think the metaphor doesn't work, but...
Right? Yeah. Because that's the thing we're trying to determine.
No, I just think like all aspects of my badminton thing don't apply. I'm not saying it's a bad example. What were you saying?
Yeah. Well, what I'm trying to say is just, if the conclusion we have about drugs has to be the same conclusion we have about, eating cake.
Well, okay. We can't generalize on all drugs, and sugar is a drug too,
Oh, true.
Yeah, sugar is not a drug.
No.
Oh.
The sugar is not a drug.
Okay, expert opinion. I'm sorry.
I can Google it just to make sure, but I'm pretty sure sugar is not a drug.
Do you have like criteria to? I mean, I would agree with you. I guess I just said that because it's addictive, and
it can be, yeah, but like gambling can be addictive. Gaming, video games can be addictive, right? So it doesn't need to be a drug to be addictive. But I believe it's not supposed to be a drug.
Okay.
But the what they use to determine what is drug and what is not a drug, I am not sure on anymore. But yeah.
Okay, have you come up with an answer to the perfect day thing? If you like the example at all.
the thing is, like, as your brother was saying, as Alex was saying, like a perfect, not every day would be perfect in a perfect life, right? Like I'd hope that in my perfect life, I'd still be able to go out and party on some ecstasy, like once per 3 months or something like that,
Mhm.
which is like the accepted cycle for like redoing ecstasy, MDMA, and whatever for your serotonin to reset. Is 3 months. That's the standard. So like in my perfect life, I'd assume I'd still be able to go out and party like that, or like have an acid trip once a year, with some friends in like a remote place chilling, right? Um, I'd hope I'd still be able to do that for sure because those are fun experiences. Although recreational, like they're awesome experiences. They're a fun time to have, and at least in my opinion, they don't have that much like a side effect, right? Especially if you space them out like that. I mean, if you're doing ecstasy slash MDMA multiple times per week for a full month, you're gonna have issues. You're gonna have long lasting issues with your serotonin. But if you space it out properly, there's ways to do it where it's not going to lead to long lasting issues.
Mhm.
Okay, and that kind of comes back to the therapeutic use as well, where monthly shroom use to put you in an alternate state and make you discover things that you wouldn't have otherwise. Correct?
Yeah,
It's a good
yeah.
parallel. Okay, in my vision, I guess I again, no offense to, let's say, the friends you suggested hanging out with, but let's say it like this. Let's say the perfect life contains literally the five. Okay, I guess that's like a philosophical ideal and it's unattainable. But let's say your friends are a group of the 10 most interesting people on earth, right? And then every party that you have is the best party on earth, or at least the best that you can ever set up, right? All of the, I don't know, you guys invest in the lighting, every food is the best snack you have, whatever. Okay, just imagine that.
Uh-huh.
What I'd like to say is that, like, if we had access to the most fulfillment, the most fulfilling versions of what organic life has access to. I guess organic, I don't mean like CO, like carbon things. I just mean like organically attainable. My bad for the use, but my intuition is that you would not need the dopamine spike or the
Uh-huh.
alternate.
To enhance.
Right, yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's like, oh, I am fully fulfilled, but the 100 out of 100 fulfillment level is enough to offset the need for this little dopamine
Mhm.
spike. So, again, you can disagree with my whole point, but if you say, okay, I'm using drugs to, let's say, offset the imperfections of what my fulfillment could amount to, okay, right? And obviously, as a philosophical podcast, our goal setting would be, okay, well, how about you make a very conscious effort to offset those fulfillment issues through a direct effort to do so, and not kind of supplement it with something that is a replacement.
My problem with that is that it's not. What if? Well, you can tell us, Phil, what your experience does for you, but what if it's not, augmenting the experience you have with your friends? What if you also hang out with those friends outside of that, and you discuss, your studies and your work and relationships, and you have fulfilling things that don't involve drugs also, but that's just a different experience that you also want to have. It's not necessarily a better one. It's more pleasure in the moment. Maybe it's less fulfilling. You don't accomplish as much. You just talk and have fun, but it's just a different one, but that you also want to have.
Mhm. Well, what I'd say to add to that would be, well, I don't know if it's really adding. I don't know if it's contributing anything, but when my issue with your example, Chris, is that like you're making a new baseline, right? Where like you're constantly fulfilled, and that's the new baseline. And the way I view drugs is that drugs will bring you over that baseline. And they will give you greater pleasure than you were already having. It will, as we were saying earlier, enhance the experience. Even though if you don't need it, right? You're fully fulfilled. The reality of it is, as a human, you're always looking for more. you're just at a new baseline now. You're just at a new level, but you're still like going over that level is still gonna feel good and it's still gonna give you pleasure, and happiness, right? Well, maybe it's fake happiness, but it's still gonna give you that pleasure. So even if you're fully fulfilled, you can still take it a step higher, I believe, with substances, and it like yeah, I guess that would be my point.
I think the thing that it would take for me to budge is ascertaining two things. One, that taking something once could potentially, well, actually, in 100% of the cases, does not directly lead to a dependence, right? And I understand that, chemically, of course, that's not how a dependence is developed. But I know people that have addictive personalities. So you take someone like you, right, with willpower and saying, well, okay, ecstasy cycled every 3 months is a good investment in my overall fun, and that's something that is attainable for me. But you take a person who is on the other side of the spectrum of willpower, and you show them a reality that is much more fun. I mean, synthetically so, but so much more fun. And then you're like, well, here are two realities. I've offered you something extremely more fun and something like this. You're not chemically dependent, but your mind is going to be on like, wait, reality could be that? And then that's all you're going to think of, correct? I mean, do you think there's a kind of prior assurance, a certain security in your control of your impulses that it takes before starting your first one, right? If everyone were to adhere to your regimen, wouldn't it take some questions answered way before you try even your first attempt at it?
Like, what do you mean by question answers? Question
answers. I guess you take something lesser, maybe relationships, right? You look at someone you enjoy hanging out with, and you look at like, oh, can I control my impulses in wanting to hang out with that person, or am I addicted to that person? What I'm saying is like, I think there's a threshold of having an addictive personality where it's just unreasonable to use it to supplement, because all your reality will be directed towards is this could be that. My life could be that. My bad for interrupting, but my life could be this, right?
I get what you're saying. With like ecstasy, they call it Super Mondays, right? So like you go out the weekend, you do MDMA the whole weekend, and you get back on Monday, and you want to kill yourself because you're fully out of serotonin, and it's not a good time. That is definitely the thing. If we go back to my baseline example earlier, like once you take the drug, you go way over baseline, and once you're done with it, you go way under baseline, and then it takes a while to naturally go back to that baseline you were at before taking that substance. So I mean, yes, there's probably questions to be answered before, where like, can you handle that dip in the baseline and then be able to go through it and then get back to your normal level? Or will you not be able to handle it and will redose constantly to synthetically get back to that level, but just for a while, because once you're done, once you're out, you're going to be back under it, and that's not going to be a good time. I don't know if that answers, but yeah, I guess you bring it to the point where, it for some people, it definitely does not make sense.
Okay, so there are three perspectives. Let's say we go back to MDMA, right? You have the before you use it, where you're like, okay, first I will experience the spike and then the dip. So obviously this decision is the more immediate answer would appeal you to. So you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to take it. Then there's after. And I mean, anyone who's known a hangover can, imagine to a lesser extent what it feels like. And in that moment, I mean, I think your intuition is like, why did I do it? Right? And my question is, from a retrospective perspective, wow, that sounds good. What your answer seems to be, taking into account the before and the after. If you were to put it on a scale, you would say that the pleasure you received before is worth the drawbacks, right? At least that's something who fully thought it out would say, right? That's someone who has the willpower and then decides to still see the scale from afar, see that it provides more joy than it takes out, and do it. But I think some people remain in the right before the drug usage thing, where their perspective is limited, and they're like, out of a lack of willpower, they know the immediate thing will be to do the drug. So it seems to me that you have this, kind of third person perspective on it, and your choice is constant. I just don't think that applies to many people, unfortunately. That's why, if coming to a more universal conclusion, I'm leaning towards the no on the use of drugs, but it's interesting. So, what do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I think we want to have a figured it out rating at the end and have an answer as much as possible. But I don't think we should be trying to be universal either. I think since people vary so much, the level of addictive personality level varies, the tolerance to certain drug varies, how those drugs affect people varies also, right? And maybe it's just a different answer for every different person, and maybe the discussion can just be like a discussion of different perspectives, and that's good too.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm just being the devil's advocate and drugs are just bad.
Yeah, but the beauty of the devil's advocate is that
we love the devil's advocate.
Yeah, we love it, because if we're not convincing enough to sway people against it, even if your answer is not technically right, well, we're just the incompetence in the conversation, correct? I mean, it's logical to me. So okay, I guess let's reframe the question. And I read a psychological blog where people said, "Do you think that drug use is always a form of escapism?" And my thought experiment on that would be, let's say a genie, every time you eat a meal, maybe it has some transferability with weed. Every time you eat a meal, a genie behind you appears and asks you, do you want to have that meal, but like the exact same thing, but it's better, like 2 points on the scale better, right? Like, let's say you were going to eat a 7 out of 10 pizza. He always proposes you a 9 out of 10 pizza. And I don't see a world where the answer is no, right? But the problem with that is I feel like certain drugs could be seen that way. And if I were to ask you, if I'm giving you two realities, right? One where it's normal life, and one where you're on MDMA 24/7. That's how you experience reality. Could you like comfortably answer that you could choose one reality over the other?
The hard thing is a trip of MDMA, or a roll, as it's more commonly called. There's a few like phases to it, right? Where before you hit the peak, you'll have to come up where it's a bit of anxiety, where you're feeling jittery, and then at the peak where it's full of ecstasy and you're super happy, you're dancing, whatever, you're partying, and then after that you get the come down where it's like things start mellowing out and you you start getting tired and you kind of want to get home and get done with it, right? You're kind of over it. So it depends on like the 24 hours. MDMA typically lasts like 4, maybe 6, 8 hours, depending on how long you're counting the come down. So like it depends on what phase I am for that 24 hours, because I don't see a really realistic MDMA trip that lasts 24 hours, except if you're redosing constantly, and at that point it gets very fiendish, where like at the end of it, or like in reality, at the end of the 24 hours of constantly doing MDMA, you're going to start feeling kind of done, spent, right? Where like you don't have anything left in you, and all that's keeping you going is the substance. So it depends, like how you kind of frame that reality, right?
Right. I guess if we take something more constant and mellow, like weed, could you answer, like, I know people like Joe Rogan, Wiz Khalifa, those are people that are actually 24/7 and they are part of my thought experiment and are actually doing it, and they choose the reality to be on weed. Well,
I'm not sure if are they 24/7
I know
all the time.
I think
high?
Wiz Khalifa is like
Okay.
I don't see a single post where he isn't.
Again, I mean, I've lived like that a bit, where like you wake up in the morning, it's a wake and bake, and then for the rest of the day you're smoking and doing your shit. So like
at least like with that. With weed, it's like realistic, like you can actually sustain it for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like it's totally doable, and like I personally would probably choose the weed reality, right? I mean, if I'm supposed in this fictional reality I'm supposed to be working and doing anything productive, I would probably not choose the weed. Because well,
Right.
you're not that productive, you're not that efficient. But
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
if we're
but
just talking recreation, it would definitely be.
yeah, I think I had a larger point with that. But I think if you can tell me that you would choose one reality over the other, well, then it must be better. And the problem with that is just always getting these. If we were to apply this conclusion to all the other drugs, always getting a glimpse of what could be and not being able to constantly sustain it because of the realities of life, right? Which are to be productive and blah blah blah. I think it's kind of, I don't know. I see it as harmful to our vision of life because constantly getting glimpses of what could be, and if you saw it as switching a switch, not just enhancing, but absolutely like going to the another reality, and you just got these 2 hours or 4 hours a week of it could be like this. It just seems like harmful to your mind state, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
I
No,
guess
I
go ahead.
I get what you mean. I get what you mean. It's basically like saying, um, well, it's just like addiction's not good, right? Needing
You heard
something
it here
constantly.
first, folks.
Addiction is not good. No. Um, but yeah, and it's always just like finding new ways of justifying it to yourself. Substance use is how I would describe addiction. And no, it's not good, and it's gonna lead you to do bad things often. Not necessarily like robbing someone to be able to get your fix, but just like ignoring stuff you need to do, like not paying on the bill or not studying for a certain exam because you're just spending your whole time smoking weed or partying or doing whatever. It can definitely be harmful, and it's very hard to balance in a healthy way.
I agree that it's hard to balance, but once again, I don't think we can like make a conclusion and go to the end with it and say, okay, then no drugs. That's the general rule. Everyone should follow. That's it. Let's go. Because the parallel I thought of is like leisure time or like watching a movie. I could say the same thing. Like, would you rather be doing tedious work or studying or watching a movie? And then okay, I choose the reality of watching a movie, and exposing yourself to watching a movie once a week is really bad because that makes you see another reality where you're
Yeah,
relaxing and
you're
it's
framing
better.
it as a ridiculous thing, but I think you agree with me that in the way you picture your perfect you, you're not sitting around watching movies. You're productive. Then you have genuine human connection. You're hopping from one productive thing to another and accomplishing the most you can on this earth. Of course, reality is different, and we are imperfect in that sense, and we give ourselves the glimpse of what could be. But wouldn't you agree that the perfect you wouldn't be sitting around watching movies?
Watching movies like with friends and discovering new art, which movies are, that probably has a place in my perfect life too.
Well, I don't know. I feel like when we get our on our productive streaks, we're like we should eliminate movies from our lives because you know
Right, but do you regret having watched like the best movies we've ever watched? Do you regret having watched that? Do you think that was a waste of time?
no, but I also think the argument of watching them together is a pretty good one in the sense that if I couldn't have anything to share with you on that and you hadn't watched it and I was the only one to have watched it, I wouldn't do it, right? And maybe there is something to be said about enhancing human connection and doing drugs together. I think when people do them alone, maybe that's the barrier we have to set because they give themselves a glimpse of what their life could be. But instead, when you just want variety and human connection, maybe doing it with someone else enhances what you know about them. I'd be comfortable with that conclusion.
Sure, I just think that you're, I took the taking some time off watching a movie example, but it could be anything, right? Just any time you take relaxing, when you contrast it with working hard, it's just different. I think I don't think it's precise to say that, oh, one reality, one thing is better so you choose that, and you shouldn't expose yourself to that. I think things are different, and things bring different value to people's lives. Either pleasure,
Mhm.
relaxation, meaningful purpose, which is maybe greater, but you not sustainable all the time either.
Yeah, but the problem is, look, let's take the example of the guy who hates his job but works a lot and then comes back home and his only solace is smoking weed and watching a movie and eating something. Well, the problem with that is every night he heightens his dopamine baseline. So the productive things that he does the next day are in the spectrum of he loves something and he hates something. They're further down the spectrum of he hates something. Things are less enjoyable, and it's not only that he's using a dip in happiness. Let's just use that term liberally, and he offsets it with a peak in happiness. But he also makes his dip worse because if you in your mind compare the weed movie watching, and then you're saying to yourself, tomorrow I have to wake up and go to the job I hate, it's going to be much worse than if you went to the job, kind of saw it as your duty, and then came back home and did some non-dopamine inducing things like people used to relax in the, I don't know, 1600s. Call me a freak of nature, but, well, not like a freak of nature, but a freak that loves nature. But that's how I see it. The most
Mother Nature specifically.
Yeah, Mother Nature specifically. The most genuine way to live is the kind of a similar way to the way in which our biology evolved. And our biology didn't evolve to handle these things. And these things make contrast, the thing on the other side of it, worse. That's how I see it.
Okay, so I guess my point to the last couple things you've been saying was that some things are just different and have a place in your life, even though like maybe that's like that leisure time is like better in quotes, less fulfilling, but better, feels better. But maybe what you're saying is that specifically drugs, to different degrees depending on the drug, that's a way that's too easy to get out of your dips, and such in a natural way that it's not recommendable to someone, to anyone, because of the risk it causes, of the different perspective it gives you, and of the potential for addiction.
Yeah, and you read a book on dopamine, and I'm surprised you're not quoting it more. The dopamine system was set up to reward the things that advance us in life, right? Or in the hierarchy that are profitable to us, right? You take something like, I don't know, finding a good relationship, like, oh, you found a mate for life. That's something fulfilling. That's something that triggers your dopamine system. But you take something as cheap of an investment as buying a pill and then putting it in your mouth, and the thing that you get on the other side of that is so colossal that, I mean, I think your vision of how to gain happiness is very stained by that, right? You think your work is like, oh, I have all this investment and I'm only getting paid this, right? It's the investment versus returns. Your system makes you think that, oh, moving my hand towards my mouth and putting this pill in my hand gives me this pleasure, but my work gives me this pleasure, and it's a lot more work. Why would I want to work? That's how I see the kind of offset that you're giving yourself.
Yeah. So I guess just for more natural things, I don't know what your thing with Mother Nature is today, but I guess things brought on by Mother Nature.
I'm writing my book, and that's a big point that I have, right? It's, if we were to quote Voltaire, right? One must cultivate their own garden. Like, I can hate on gardeners all I want, but I don't think there's a
And
more
he does
direct
hate them.
Yeah, I do hate them, but imagine investing an hour in your life into something that seems as meaningless as cultivating herbs, and then putting them in a salad and eating a salad that you spent perhaps the last 3 weeks cultivating the vegetables for. That's kind of a genuine dopamine reward, a fulfilling thing in my head.
Yeah. So what I was about to say was just, I guess our dopamine system, and which we can't go into detail with because we don't know the intricacies of, but
Yeah, we do.
Well, Chris does. He's an expert on all things, but it was made to self-regulate for these sort of things that aren't new, concentrated, synthetic, and very, very effective, right? When things like drugs come in, our system is not ready for that. And you're saying that, yeah, as a general rule, it seems reasonable to say that it's not recommendable. But the people that are informed, like Phil, and do the cycle and know exactly the effects. I don't know. What about Phil's happy life? Have you thought of Phil? Do drugs have a place in his life?
That's a question that's directed at me. I don't know. I think it's a good question to answer. Maybe I just don't want to finish the episode with the following. Drugs are generally bad, but use them in moderation. Like we've wasted 1 hour and 15 minutes for a conclusion like that. No. Okay. So I think the question I would ask everyone, if Phil isn't able to answer it this episode, that's good, because it's a deeper question and it's a personal one, and his answer might not match yours. Imagine your perfect day. Imagine you are paired with the perfect person that you want to spend your life with. Imagine you have your dream job. Are those things attainable for you? Of course. Like, make them attainable in your head. Is in that life, are you consuming drugs? If the answer is yes, keep doing it. And also keep striving toward that perfect life. If no, then offsetting the fact that you haven't reached your perfect life with the spike of dopamine, I don't think it's warranted. I think you'd be better off starting a garden and cultivating vegetables. What do you think, Phil?
No, it's a very good question. I honestly I don't know. My first thought would be like to say, yeah, sure, I would still have weed. I don't see myself not having it. Like, why would I not, right? So like it's hard to answer. Like, definitely, if it would be the perfect life, like, well, why would I use it? But it's it's hard to see because, well,
Yeah,
because
but
I've been using it for so long. I haven't stopped for so long. So like, yeah, I haven't seen sober life in so long. So I don't remember it that well. Maybe that's the issue. But
and
like, I
in
don't
the
see
end, also
myself
the
going
question
without it.
is, who has a perfect life, right? Who is going to attain that perfect life? I mean, if I'm
Mhm.
trying to come to that conclusion, I mean, how many people can say that they will? But I think
But
this,
I feel like it would still bring me pleasure, even in my perfect life, if I was still using weed. Um, Now the justification to that, I don't have it right now, but I do feel like if I was in my perfect life, I would still be smoking weed at least once in a while. Maybe not at the same frequency as I'm doing it currently, but I still feel like I would at least do it once in a while, like once per week or something.
okay. And you don't think, I mean, you've chosen weed, but I guess I'd like to, and I can see how, I don't know, for some reason I can have an intuition of how that would have a place in it. But you take something as MDMA, right? And imagine, let's give you the most glamorous life. Let's say you're a hedonist, right? You're on yachts, you're taking private jets to visit the most fascinating people on earth. You have the most fascinating conversation every time you talk to someone, right?
Mhm.
And
I feel like things can still get boring, right? Like, even if you are always doing like new glamorous things, always seeing a new yacht, always seeing a new like private jet or whatever, always going to a new country. Um, I feel like there's still repetition that happens in all these events, and it'll still get boring at one point where you'll need something to, well, not need, but it'd be interesting if there was something there to enhance it and make it better, right? Make it more interesting to be in that situation and more interactive or whatever. And yeah, I'd feel like there'd still be a place, even if you are the Jeff Bezos and you're going on a rocket to be in outer space for like 5 minutes. I'd still think like having some MDMA while going up on the rocket would be fun, right? It would be a new experience. It would be something.
if medically
Uh,
approved.
yeah, obviously.
yeah, and that's a fun
But yeah.
consideration for sure. But I think that the things that you carefully select to be part of your life until the end, right? Let's say you didn't have a knee problem, Alex, right? Let's say soccer was part of that. right? So okay, you filled, let's say, 2 hours of your week with soccer, right? Is that reasonable for you?
Mhm.
So you have all these building blocks that you are responsible upon exploring yourself to build this kind of, again, it's not it's no Jeff Bezos life, but it's something that can fulfill you in the long term, and you've built that. Well, you argue that those things could get boring, but let's say one of the pieces of the puzzle is weed consumption. Well, how is it different from any other piece of the puzzle in the sense that that too will get boring? What I'm saying is, I have an idealistic view of those pieces of the puzzle. They have a very high value in the sense that, you've done them for a long time. Let's say Alex has played soccer for 8 years. To this day, he wants to do that. And if for 8 years it hasn't gotten boring, there's a good chance it won't for the next 8. That's my view, at least.
Okay.
And that's kind of something how I see the higher value of those pieces of the puzzle. But the problem with weed, right, is, well, actually, again, the tolerance kind of acts a little bit differently from other drugs, I feel. But it seems justifiable that it won't get that boring in the long term. I don't know. You're just saying I could use it to switch it up, and it's very hard for me to say that's not the case. But I also, if you did put those building blocks of your perfect life in the category of having the potential to become boring, well, I would put weed in that too. I think that's fair.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And if I bring it back to like my personal life, like weed has gotten boring at points, but I feel like maybe it's just because it's a drug where that brings you dopamine and pleasure, where it, like, even if it gets boring, you're still like you're still doing it, right? You're not reaching a point where it's boring. You want to let it go, and you won't touch it anymore. I guess the dependence maybe helps not make it boring. Um, I mean, it's probably not a good thing, right? But like, I think that helps it, and like, I haven't seen myself get bored with weed, sadly. Like, it's still a thing where, like, at the day on the day, I'd be like, well, yeah, I'd go for a bong, or I'd go for a joint or whatever. I don't know. And at the same time, it's not something like smoking weed doesn't take an hour, right? It takes 5 minutes. It's hard to be bored with it. Maybe you're bored. You could maybe get bored with the effects of it, but with the action of it, it's hard to get bored of it, right? Because it's just 5 minutes, for
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a
of course.
joint.
I was referring to the effect, of course.
Yeah.
So we're probably gonna have an episode 2 where we're all high, right? That just makes sense. But okay, if everyone feels comfortable with what they've said, we could wrap it up.
Yep, I'm good.
No, I think I'm good. I don't know if I said much that was interesting.
No, you did absolutely.
Sure.
I think obviously we're not Kant and Heidegger, but I think we can make people think, and your expertise and our considerations combined can provide some value. So my figured it out rating. So we have this rating of how much did we figure out a certain topic. By the way, happiness was what, a 9 or something?
Yeah, we figured out happiness at a 9 out of 10.
But
Damn, all right.
it was a more concrete episode. So I had a very restricted view in the beginning, and I'd say I am more like leaning more to your side, but it's obviously, if it were on a scale, I'd still be like 70% on my side, obviously, but it's still more than it was at the beginning of the episode, which is a pleasant thought. So I would put it at maybe 7, just good, because I think we've touched on very important points and we've attempted to answer them aptly.
Yeah, and I don't think a figured it out rating is a rating that evaluates the quality of the episode either, or of the conversation. Just to a certain degree, I disagreed with Chris, and it feels like we figured it out less when we disagree. So I was leaning towards a 6 or a 7 too. I'll go 6 to play the devil's advocate.
Okay, what do you think, Phil? How much more insight on it do you have than at the beginning of the episode?
Well, your perspective was definitely interesting, and one that I hadn't thought about. And you're like making me question my whole life now.
Whoa.
I'm kidding. No, but no, it was definitely interesting. And like, I do feel like these questions could be explored more. And we did not reach the bottom of it.
In
I would
episode 2
tend
on shrooms, of course.
on shrooms now. Okay, we're gonna have a nice cocktail.
I mean, might as well do a
episode 2.
mini series and try them all now.
Yeah, that could be smart. But no, I would tend towards like a 5 or a 6 because I feel like there's still a lot to be explored here.
You guys are right. I'm gonna change it to 6, and then if we, I mean, I guess we can average it out and just put 5.3 or something, or no, 5.6 because 5.66. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Phil, for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
It's been the Thinkin Bros. If you want to know more, go on thinkinbros.com or contact us at thinkinbros@gmail.com, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.